This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A key coalition partner backs the army's call for the removal of Algeria's President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. The Cyclone Idai crisis deepens as the first cases of cholera are confirmed in Mozambique. And the death toll from the attack on Mali herders rises to 157. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. We examine the trouble with Africa's aviation sector. And Nigeria welcomes an interest rate cut announced by the central bank on Tuesday. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's start the hour in Algeria, where the coalition ally of Algeria's ruling party has called for President Abdelaziz Bouteflika to resign, piling pressure on the ailing leader after the army chief demanded he be declared unfit to rule. CGTN's Susan Mongeli reports.
The coalition ally of Algeria's ruling party is the latest to speak out against President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. They are calling for the ailing president's resignation, following nationwide protests since February. The ruling FLN party had originally backed Bouteflika's candidacy. On Tuesday, though, the country's influential army chief declared Bouteflika unfit for office.
Within this context, we have to find a solution that gets the country out of the current crisis and that responds to the legitimate demands of the Algerian people. A solution that guarantees respect for the Constitution and the continuation of the state authority.
The military is widely seen as a silent kingmaker in Algerian politics.
This is a brave decision, and it's the first step on the path for democracy that is still long. We appreciate this step, and we are awaiting other steps. The movement will continue until the realization of a democratic republic, the Second Republic.
Citizens in the North African country have taken to the streets in the capital Algiers and in other major cities. They want a younger generation of leaders that can fight corruption and create more jobs.
I am not happy because the one who will govern now was in the old regime. We don't want old faces. We want Algerian university graduates, for example. They say there aren't any with the necessary qualities, but we do have them.
Presidential elections were due in April, but Bouteflika has postponed them indefinitely. The president, who has been in power for 2 decades, announced in March that he would not run for a 5th term. But this has done little to quell the mass protests. Susan Mongeli, CGTN.
Well, for more on these developments in Algeria, a little earlier we spoke to Mohammed Shakha, a professor of international politics at Cairo University. This is what he had to say.
It is very significant movement, or it is very significant step that the chief of the army announced that we will protect the democracy and we will not protect the president anymore. So it is just like protection for the democracy and the people solution or the people choice. The army is not an isolated island. So the army is a part of people. So the army is moved now because the people said that they don't want Bouteflika anymore. So they respect the choice of the people, and they want to say that we will protect the choice of the people, whatever, even if it is against the President Bouteflika.
Well, let's turn now to news from Egypt. A coalition of opposition parties has urged citizens to vote against constitutional amendments that would potentially allow President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to remain in power until 2034. Last month, Parliament approved overwhelmingly a package of constitutional changes to the 2014 Charter that's also set to further enshrine the military's role in politics. The amendments will now face a national referendum, which is expected to be held in the coming weeks. The civil democratic movement is against the changes.
The civil democratic movement announced its clear and explicit rejection of these amendments from the first moment of the official proposal of the draft amendment to the constitution because it's unconstitutional and will lead to the consolidation of dictatorship and the rule of the individual. The proposed amendments will demolish liberties, democracy and the existence of a civil state.
Constitutions are not made to be changed once every 4 or 5 years. And when you change the constitution, it has to be something totally important and something that has the consensus of the population. And unfortunately, we have the Speaker of the Parliament saying that the requirements of this stage oblige us to make the President stay up until 2034. I don't know what are the requirements of that stage, and why are we repeating the same scenario like Mubarak and like Sadat and like Gaddafi and like Saddam Hussein and like Bashar Assad? Why aren't we learning the lessons?
Well, let's turn now to our continuing coverage of Cyclone Idai and its aftermath. The risk of cholera is now becoming a major concern in and around Beira, Mozambique, as floodwaters subside from Cyclone Idai. Makeshift camps are being established across the province and in the city to accommodate survivors. Here's Angela Coppola in Beira with more.
The government lead minister for Idai response efforts says that they are coping with the influx of survivors. Worryingly, the country's national health director, Hussein Isi, says there are now 2,500 confirmed cases of acute diarrhea and 5 confirmed cholera cases.
We're having a big increase in cases of diarrhea, and we already identified 5 cases of cholera in the city of Beira, Bairro da Munhava. So this is something that is of concern of the government, and we have teams deployed all over the provinces and the affected area.
The country's public health department is responsible for its hospitals and treatment centers with the help of the aid agency's resources.
From now, every day we'll have the right number of cases. You know, in the total cases of diarrhea, some are not cholera and other are cholera.
A cholera outbreak was a distinct probability and something authorities and aid agencies were planning for. A cholera treatment center should be up and running on Wednesday at the Beira Central Hospital.
Well, we are happy, yes. That's why we are just wanting this site, because the such way we are attending patients now is smaller. So at the end of the day, we move all the patients from that to this side. So I think it will be better to attend them.
With just 5 cases reported thus far, it's still early days, but the authorities are taking no chances.
We have around 170,000 people in our camps, which we are improving as the days go by. Most of them already have doctors there, have clear water and other means of assistance.
I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Beira, Mozambique.
Well, let's get the very latest now from Angelo Coppola. He joins us on the line from Beira. Angelo, of course, as we saw there in your report, some of the worst fears are being confirmed as 5 cases of cholera have been confirmed. Just give us more details on what is happening on the ground as far as the health concerns are going at this stage.
Lindy, you'll excuse the noise in the background here. We're at the ops center, which is at the Beira airport, and these 8 vehicles and planes are coming in a dime a dozen, so there is some background noise. Look, the bottom line here is that we've been warned for the last week that it's a problem. Cholera is looming. It's going to happen. We're just unsure of the scale of the event or the disaster, the pending disaster. Correa, the minister in charge, was saying that it depends now on how much information they start getting back from the different aid camps they've got scattered around the province. They tackled those 5 cases, and those are all in the Beira area. So it's early days, but the issue really is the reporting will start happening with the other regional transit or camps sending information through via the aid agencies, because they're in comms with the op center here at the Beira airport. So it's going to climb, it's probably going to spike, and people are trying to, or the aid agencies are trying to get their ducks in a row to deal with this potential crisis that's looming.
And as you say, it is at this stage still early days, but as we know, relief efforts are sort of multi-focused at this stage. Do you think then there's enough, or at least do authorities there think there is enough capacity or resources to contain an outbreak of cholera?
Look, the agencies that are operating here have been in similar situations across the world and in other parts of Africa, so they know what to expect. They always plan for the worst. Every one of the agencies that we spoke to today said the same thing. They knew it was coming. There's an emergency hospital coming in from one of the agencies. Médecins Sans Frontières sending more doctors. The World Food Programme is ramping up its efforts. They're going to be looking for around 100-odd million to buy more food for the next 6 months. We understand that there's some stuff coming in from the International Red Cross Society. They're planning to put an emergency response unit down which can provide water for around 15,000 people a day. That's clean drinking water to try and minimize the risk of cholera spreading. And then they're also putting in emergency mass sanitation units which can support around 20,000. But you've got to remember that we're dealing with 170,000 people in the established camps. And that's not the people stuck up in the regions that are still on high ground, that are congregating in villages waiting for help to come to them. So there is enough resource. The government is working with the agencies. They reckon they can manage it. But the first step has to be observation. There's got to be monitoring to make sure that there's no spread of this really dangerous disease. Lindy?
Absolutely. Angelo Coppola, thank you so much. Joining us there on the line from Beira in Mozambique, as we know, the town that was hardest hit by Cyclone Idai. Let's turn our attention to Zimbabwe now. Of course, also devastated by the impact of Cyclone Idai, the eastern provinces of Manicaland, Mashvingo and Mashonaland East were worst hit by the storm in that country. The disaster has caused water shortages. In many parts of the area, water supply pipelines were destroyed by flooding that was triggered by the cyclone. Government has been trying to replace the water supply pipelines since last week. And once completed, normal water supply will be restored to residents.
We have been working here for more than a week. What we are trying to do here is to replace the pipes which have been swept away by the floods. We are collecting water from this river to the pump. Then the pump will then pump the water to the factory up there, and the residents who are staying there are going to use that water.
Water shortages has affected us because we cannot have water since our tanks, our water pipes have been washed away by the floods which has occurred last week. So recently we haven't much received enough of water, though we are getting assistance through the fire tender which supplies water within these villages. But if it delayed, it means we have to go in search of water. So it's affecting us because we cannot do our household chores as much as we want to do them when the water supply is very adequate.
So flooding in the south of the continent and drought in the east. Let's come now to Kenya, where a prolonged drought is causing havoc in a number of regions in the country. A CGTN crew joined a resident as he moved his animals in search of grazing land. Our reporter Robert Nagila is in Baringo County with this report.
It's just after sunrise and William Loturo, a father of four, is beginning his day. As his children head off to school, he walks to the goat pen to release the animals. The Loturo family lives in Tiati constituency, Baringo, one of 11 counties across Kenya devastated by a prolonged drought. Each morning, he takes them across the hills in search of grazing ground. He's agreed to let us accompany him today. It's a 30-minute walk to a nearby watering point.
It was set up by a construction company for locals. We start bringing them here from September. The rains here end in July.
After the animals have had their fill, we begin the long trek in search of grass. The ferocity of the drought stares at us. Women digging holes in a riverbed in search of drinking water for their families. The terrain is challenging and constantly changing. The drought has killed many animals as water and grazing ground have become scarce. As yet, no official figures are available.
I take the animals every day in search of grass, except Saturdays when there is no school. It's the children's turn.
It's just after 9 o'clock. We've been walking for now for about 2 hours, climbing for about 25 or so odd minutes. Temperatures are rising really, really fast, and it's clearly beginning to have an impact. But for the locals, they seem okay with it. This is something they do every day.
Many herders affected by the drought are now selling off their animals to get money to buy food for their families. But prices have sharply dropped, and instead of the usual $35 for a goat, they now sell for as low as $10. The weatherman has forecast long rains in April, but for many people here, that may be too late to save their animals. Bob Nagila, CGTN, Baringo, Kenya.
Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni is in Kenya for a two-day state visit for meetings with President Uhuru Kenyatta beginning on Wednesday. Now, the two leaders have held talks on trade and investment at the coastal city of Mombasa. Isabel Nakiria reports.
The bilateral talks held at the State House in Mombasa are meant to strengthen economic ties between the two countries. Presidents Museveni and Kenyatta have also attended a business forum addressing challenges in doing business, like delays in cargo clearance between borders and trade tariffs. Uganda depends on Kenya's port of Mombasa for transit cargo, and so does Rwanda and South Sudan. This meeting comes at a time when diplomatic relations between Uganda and Rwanda are strained, leading to the closure of the border and disrupting trade in the region. Rwanda accuses Uganda of harboring dissidents. President Kenyatta is said to be patching up relations between the two countries. 2 weeks ago, Mr. Kenyatta was in Kigali, where he held talks with Rwanda's Kagame before directly flying to Uganda to meet President Museveni. President Museveni's visit to Kenya follows a ministerial meeting that discussed enhancing trade and investment in the region. Kenya is one of Uganda's biggest markets for its goods, with trade volumes showing an increase. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, in Kampala.
You are watching Africa Live. Time now for a short break. Coming up, DRC scales up its Ebola response as the epidemic exceeds 1,000 cases. And MPs debate proposals on the future of Brexit ahead of votes later on a way forward.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start in Mali now, where a spokesperson for the government says the death toll from Saturday's attack by gunmen on villages has now risen to 157. Most of the victims were women and children. The International Criminal Court has condemned the attack, with the court's prosecutor saying the crimes may fall under the court's jurisdiction. The Hague-based court plans to send a delegation to Mali. Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has responded to the attack by replacing 2 generals and disbanding an anti-jihadist vigilante group. The group's Dogon fighters are suspected of carrying out the weekend's massacre. And moving on to the Democratic Republic of Congo, the World Health Organization has launched an initiative to provide Ebola protection education for schools in areas that are affected by the current outbreak. The initiative seeks to boost community trust and galvanize efforts of aid organizations that are offering healthcare support.
The unwanted 1,000 Ebola case milestone in DRC highlights how community engagement is key to realizing reduced infection rates, and school children have now been co-opted into an awareness campaign.
I noticed that many children don't fully understand Ebola. One student asked me, why do we have to wash only our hands, not the whole body? And this is why I decided to go from school to school to raise children's awareness about the disease.
Katungu works closely with school directors to ensure the information reaches the young and most vulnerable.
We have children who are the messengers to their parents. Children are curious. They question everything. This is why I find that this messaging comes at an important time.
The World Health Organization and its partners have already visited more than 100 schools in Beni. The initiative started on 10th of August 2018, 10 days after the beginning of the outbreak, and so far, more than 10,000 students have been reached. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Uganda's progress in tackling HIV is under threat from increasing drug resistance. The government and NGOs say the problem is particularly acute in rural areas which experience medical shortages. As Leon Sinyange reports, a lack of access to antiretrovirals and the stigma attached to taking them is believed to be fueling the resistance that's threatening efforts in fighting the epidemic.
Singing against stigma, Moses Nsubuga is part of a group dedicated to tackling discrimination faced by Ugandans with HIV. He says when he was first diagnosed over 20 years ago, he often failed to take his antiretroviral drugs.
And when I started treatment in 1998, I did not take it well because I did not know the importance of adherence. So as a result, I developed HIV drug resistance in the year 2000. So I faced it so rough, I fell sick, I nearly died.
As a musician, Nsubuga is now part of a campaign push in Uganda for greater HIV drug adherence, aimed at reducing the stigma surrounding the virus.
Most young people who fail think that they are the only one taking the medications. But when they see Stigmaless, they get changed. So I formed Stigmaless as a way of communicating to fellow people that it's important to take medications every day.
It's estimated 1.3 million people live with HIV in Uganda. But while more than 70% are enrolled on antiretroviral treatment, drug resistance continues to plague efforts to combat its spread. A 2018 study by the Uganda Virus Research Institute showed that there's a gradual increase in access to treatment by people living with HIV. However, such strides are facing a drawback, with 2 in every 10 resistant to antiretroviral drugs. Researchers blame the resistance on the lack of adherence to drug regimens prompted by poor access to drugs, as well as the stigma associated with taking them. Resistance is especially prevalent among mothers, children, and adolescents.
Every time you miss out your drugs, there's a window for the virus to mutate, as I said, to change into a form that will be resistant. And once that happens, much of the gains that we have got are going to be reversed.
Health officials say drug-resistant patients are switched to different drug regimens, but the medication can be very expensive and only available in small quantities. The government says it's looking for alternatives.
In the last 1 year, we have been working out what is the best treatment approach for a country that will give us maximum impact. And we have been looking at all the drugs, and there's a new drug which has come in, which you must have heard about, which is called dolutegravir, which we are now introducing in the treatment regimens as our first line for adults.
HIV infection rates have steadily declined over the last decade in Uganda, with a dramatic scaling up in treatment programs. The Uganda government says, despite recent setbacks, it wants to capitalize on that progress by encouraging more testing and treatment, behavior change, and eliminating mother-to-child transmission. Leon Senyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Staying with health matters, experts believe a tuberculosis-free world is possible by 2045 if governments commit to increasing political and financial resources to be directed at priority areas. Now, this came out of a report commissioned by South Africa's National Department of Health and the Aurum Institute. The report marks the end of an almost two-year journey with significant contributions from TB leaders in public health and science. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
The Commission report encourages to seize the moment by increasing the country's commitment to achieving the End TB targets and building on political momentum to end the TB epidemic. TB is one of the top 10 causes of death worldwide. This is in spite the fact that the disease is preventable and curable. People with battered immune systems, like those living with HIV, are at greater risk of being infected with TB. This report indicates that the disease kills at least 1.6 million people each year, and the quality of care for TB patients remains inadequate.
We need to reach all persons at high risk of developing TB, particularly people living with HIV, and we need to offer them screening for TB and prevention services. We need to be reminded that TB is a disease of poverty, and that where people in poverty seek care is often not where we provide it. And so we need to think differently around how we provide those services.
TB alone in South Africa kills more people annually than HIV and AIDS, and in combination, the two diseases are lethal. TB patients defaulting on medication is one of the major problems in dealing with this disease, leading to multi-resistant tuberculosis. Activists and health experts say adherence is key.
It doesn't matter how difficult the road is, you need to adhere to the treatment. It does not matter how big the pills may look. I'm standing here because I decided. I made that huge decision to adhere to those heartbreaking pills.
This report also deals with the challenge of the missing millions of TB patients.
Remember, at the United Nations high-level meeting, one of the 5 asks, was to ask heads of state to help us mobilize resources to find what we call the 4 million missing people. Because it's estimated that in the world we now have 10 million people who are infected with TB, but only 6 million are on treatment. The other 4 million, we know they are out there, but we also know that each one of them has got the capacity to infect 15 others.
The report emphasizes that commitment is needed on a global scale to eradicate the disease. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Tembisa, South Africa.
Let's turn now to technology in the classroom. Egypt's Ministry of Education has started an ambitious plan to introduce tablets to high school students. It started with 708,000 tablets distributed to grade 10s. But this week, a scheduled digital mock exam on these devices failed to take place. Here's Adel Al-Makhroui with more.
Egypt is radically changing its high school education system. This year's 10th graders are the first to experience that change. More than 700,000 tablets have been distributed to them in an attempt to digitize their curricula and examinations.
Our high school system depended on a sole exam at the end of the school year in each subject. That exam determined the entire grade and hence the future of the students. We're changing that now to distribute the grades all over the year. We're doing that gradually while introducing tablets to high school students. This is a trial phase. Some exams will be on paper like usual and others digital.
Education Ministry is now committed to purchase hundreds of thousands of tablets every year That's estimated to cost around $170 million annually. The tablets will only have access to educational content. All entertainment features have been locked for students. Tablets should make studying easier. However, there has been resistance among many students.
It's a very good idea, but at a very wrong time. In high school, we have to focus on studying. These years will guide my university life, and then my career afterwards, and that puts on pressure. Because I don't know how the exams will look on the new interface, I don't know if I'll be fast enough typing in the answers.
The ministry must plan well for this huge change in schooling system. They could have offered training sessions in the summer break following middle school, instead of surprising us like that with a system no one has ever experienced before.
This week, the first digital mock exam was scheduled to take place. Due to the immense load, the examination servers went down.
This is just a trial phase. I believe its fruits will reap later. It is a great change in Egyptian education because students will depend more on understanding subjects rather than memorizing. It just needs time.
For decades, parents and students have been complaining about the Egyptian high school education system. If the government successfully passes this 10-grade trials, it will be a landmark achievement and a relief to millions of students. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's turn now to the latest Brexit news. British Prime Minister Theresa May is being accused by Andrew Bridgen, a member of her own Conservative Party, of failing to take the United Kingdom out of the European Union as expected on March 29th. He says this has made her constituents lose confidence in her. Earlier, May responded to the accusations.
I hope the message he will take back to his constituents is a very simple one, which is we can indeed guarantee delivering on Brexit. We can guarantee delivering on Brexit if this week he and others in this House support the deal.
Well, the British Parliament has now decided to vote on several Brexit alternatives for a way through this divorce impasse. The major options on the table include establishing a customs union and closing alignment with the single market, seeking a managed no-deal Brexit if a withdrawal agreement can't be reached, and revoking Article 50. Meanwhile, the EU has agreed to delay Brexit until May 22nd if Parliament agrees the deal this week. But May's government said it will only bring the twice-defeated deal back to Parliament if it believes it will be successful. And of course, the European Council President Donald Tusk continues to urge EU lawmakers to remain open to a lengthy postponement of Brexit while Britain rethinks its position.
Before the European Council, I said that we should be open to a long extension if the UK wishes to rethink its Brexit strategy, which would of course mean the UK's participation in the European Parliament elections. You cannot betray the 6 million people who signed the petition to revoke Article 50, the 1 million people who marched for a people's vote, or the increasing majority of people who want to remain in the European Union. They may feel that they are not sufficiently represented by the UK Parliament, but they must feel that they are represented by you in this chamber, because they are Europeans. Thank you.
Your business news up next with Uche.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, Africa's aviation sector continues to make major losses. And Nigeria welcomes the interest rate cut announced by the central bank on a Tuesday.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation. where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off with Africa's aviation sector. Despite its immense potential, Africa's airline market continues to make major losses. Now, carriers like Kenya Airways and South African Airways have been losing millions of dollars annually. Some now argue that a more liberal aviation market could be the answer. But at what cost? Well, CGTN's Ramanyang sought some answers at the Africa CEO Forum in Kigali.
Africa is the most expensive aviation market on the planet. With the exception of Ethiopian Airlines, all other large carriers in sub-Saharan Africa are losing hundreds of millions of dollars every year. In January, data from IATA indicated that Africa as a whole accounted for barely 2% of total global passenger traffic, with the lowest passenger load factor of any region in the world at barely 70%. Now, the continent's aviation market is deeply fragmented, with multiple charges and taxes being imposed on carriers and passengers alike. Demand, of course, is also being artificially suppressed by governments that tightly control who can fly into and out of their territory. One proposed solution to that is more collaboration and not less.
We can also look at other areas of collaboration. We can, between us and Kenya, we can agree, instead of Rwanda flying 3 times a day and KQ flying 3 times a day, why don't we do it, you do 2, I do 2, and we have a joint venture on that particular route to be able to serve it better, and then we can free up some of our aircraft to actually use it on underserved routes as well. So there's ways to bridge that gap as well. Can we collaborate more on MROs? Can we collaborate more in terms of the Aviation Academy? Can we work together in order to make sure we cut costs, but also get a piece of the pie of the common market of East Africa?
But of course, different carriers have different problems. Kenya Airways, for instance, has about 3,600 employees on its payroll compared to Ethiopia's 11,300. But even with a third of the planes and a third of the employees, its direct staff costs are about 72% of what Ethiopians pay. Those costs are not likely to fall anytime soon.
There is no one reason why we have problems. And it's so assuming that tomorrow we have a miracle talk with our pilots and crew and they cut their salary in half. Of course, first of all, I don't think it's good motivation to ask them to do so, but I think I agree with you that they could be more productive. But on the other hand, I think we can obtain something if we give them a perspective. Because if I come to you and say, oh, by the way, sorry, but competition is coming, so I need to cut your salary and don't promise you a bright future, why would you agree? I wouldn't agree for myself.
And it's not just labour concerns that KQ has to deal with. Its proposal to take over operations at JKIA may have gotten a frosty reception by some, but the rest of East Africa is not sitting still at all. Years of losses notwithstanding, Rwanda still gets significant investments right across the board. In addition to government guarantees to expand its fleet, which now stands at about 12 planes, Rwanda has gotten $119 million as an operational subsidy in the 2018-2019 fiscal year. The state is also borrowing over $160 million in 2019 and 2020 to fund the construction of an entirely new airport some 40 kilometers from Kigali. Now, let's put aside all the arguments about what fair competition is or isn't just for a moment, with Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania all investing in reviving or expanding their national carriers. On paper, at least, consumers right now are really spoiled for choice. But at what point will these costs of these carriers move off taxpayers' balance sheets, or should they just stay there? Ramanyang, CGTN, Kigali.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee has cut its benchmark lending rate by 0.5%. It, however, left other key policy parameters untouched. Now, the committee has been repeatedly criticized for keeping credit out of reach for businesses and, as a result, stifling growth in the private sector. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam takes a look at what the reduction means to Africa's largest economy.
The move was largely unexpected, but the central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, says it wouldn't have come at a better time.
The committee was convinced that doing this would further uphold the bank's commitment to promoting strong growth by way of encouraging credit flow to the productive sectors of the economy. The MPC also felt that signaling through loosening by a marginal rate would serve to manage the sentiments in the capital flow market owing to the wider spread in yields in the emerging market and developing economies relative to the advanced economies.
The committee has resisted pressure to loosen its policy parameters for the past 15 sittings, preferring to curb a double-digit inflation. A single digit has not been achieved, but it's close. Inflation has fallen from 16 to the current 11.31%.
Yeah, we seem to have some level of stability in exchange rates, and inflation seems to be easing, still at double digit, but lower region of the double digit, which is 11 point something, over 11%, not up to 12%. So if we want to reduce interest rate by 0.5%, I don't think we have so much impact in inflation and impact on exchange rates, but certainly it's expected to have so much impact on job creation.
The committee did not change other policy parameters. Cash reserve ratio and liquidity ratio still stand at 22.5% and 30% respectively. Nigeria's GDP grew by 1.93% in 2018, and the central bank is projecting a 2.4% growth rate this year. Despite the marginal cut in the lending rate, the committee is walking cautiously, giving headwinds facing Nigeria's economy. Volatility in global oil prices, which is the country's lifeline, means the economy is vulnerable. The committee is urging the federal government to aggressively pursue economic diversification to safeguard the gains made this far. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
And in recent years, supermarkets have been flourishing in Benin's commercial capital of Cotonou. Amongst those mini markets is one established a Chinese chain store. It is known as the Chinese supermarket of Cotonou. Now, it's turning out to be a favorite as it continues to bring China to small and medium-sized businesses in the city at a reasonable cost. Here's CGTN's Beryl Oro reporting.
The bond shows the Chinese supermarket that is now very popular in the Kajeon neighborhood of Cotonou, the capital of Benin. It stocks daily consumer products, building materials, kitchen utensils, furniture and TV sets among other items, all of them imported directly from China, and most customers say they are happy.
C'est un super bazar, on peut tout trouver ici.
It's like a huge bazaar. You can find anything here, and above all, at a really reasonable cost. When you come here, you want everything at the same time. There really are innovative products in Chinese products because everything is beautiful.
I saw some taps there earlier. I looked a little bit at what I found elsewhere, and I think the quality is better here and the price also matches. Chinese products have become standard, but what remains to be done is a little bit more communication and awareness around them.
Previously, such items would be a preserve of a few who would travel outside their country. Now the exotic stuff is available right here at their doorstep.
My aunt used to come here and I saw some utensils at her house. She told me this is where she bought them. So I came to buy some and I see that they are very good quality goods.
The Chinese supermarket in Cotonou offers wholesome opportunities to retail traders and even to new traders. According to this establishment's manager, the purpose here is to improve the competitiveness of shops in Benin.
In our supermarket, we hire about 10 locals and 2 Chinese employees. We established this supermarket mainly to allow small and medium-sized businesses to come and buy supplies from us. Those who cannot afford to go to China can come and buy their supplies here.
As a space for trade, the Chinese supermarket in Cotonou is a means of promoting Chinese culture in Benin. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And heading to Cameroon now, a farming initiative is helping train and fund youth living in rural areas to enable them invest in agribusiness and create jobs. Now, about 2,000 young farmers have enrolled in the project so far. It is supported by the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Majala with more.
The Youth Agro-Pastoral Entrepreneurship Promotion Program was started in 2015 to promote farming, improve food security, and create jobs for young farmers. Gabriel Eta is among those who enrolled in the initiative. He grows pepper, cucumber, and tomatoes on his farm in Obala, central Cameroon.
I like agriculture a lot, and as an entrepreneur, you must make progress and not stagnate. When the Youth Agro-Pastoral Entrepreneurship Promotion Program gave me funds, it wasn't for me just to concentrate on one type of farming, but rather on different types of farming, which would help other young people, and also so that I could employ other young people.
The International Fund for Agricultural Development and the Cameroonian government offer support for this program by granting $200 to start out. Registered farmers get agricultural training to enhance skills on proper management of finances and running a profitable business.
When I look at how much growth the different types of farming have brought here, I feel really proud. When I plant cucumbers and see them grow, I feel a sense of pride because of all the effort I've put in. I also think that when I put my produce on the market, it will bring me a certain amount of money.
Through this business, Eta has managed to provide employment for 3 other young people. On a good month, he makes $800 from his farm business. He sells his produce to traders who buy in bulk and later sell the vegetables and poultry on the local market.
I like buying chicken from him because he sells organic chicken. What I like about him is that every time I need to buy chicken, he's always ready to sell one. He's not the type of vendor who will tell you to come tomorrow only to find that he has no chicken.
The program aims to train over 25,000 young people and create over 5,000 agricultural businesses. For entrepreneurs like Eta, this initiative has provided a boost in their income and expansion of businesses. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, British Prime Minister Theresa May says she could fulfill her pledge to take Britain out of the European Union if Parliament backs her divorce deal this week. But of course, there still are so many uncertainties. We'll examine that top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks so much, Uche. Well, let's take a short break. Your sports news coming up next. Netball players look ahead to the 2023 World Cup in Cape Town, South Africa.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.